Hey everyone, and welcome back to my channel. For those of you who are new here, welcome. My name is Kayla and I release new videos about all things BPD every Monday. So if that sounds good to you, be sure to hit the subscribe button down below as well as the bell notification up top. So like I had mentioned, today we're going to be talking about radical acceptance, which is part of the DBT distress tolerance skills. Many, if not most folks who struggle with borderline personality disorder struggle with overwhelming and intense emotions. So what do we do when we experience those things? We need to learn skills and ways of how to tolerate them. And in life, oftentimes pain cannot be avoided, but suffering can. So this is this whole premise that as a human being, a fundamental experience that we all share in common is that we all will experience pain. We're all going to have bad experiences and bad moments and bad feelings, and that's just a part of being a human being. And it's this ruminating and obsessing over this harshness of life and how we don't like it, or this avoidance of the bad, that actually causes us to re-wound ourselves and in turn inflict suffering. There's this saying that goes like, pain plus acceptance equals pain, while pain plus non-acceptance equals suffering. So this radical piece from radical acceptance means to accept all the way. It means to let go of struggling, to let go of the bitterness, and accept things in a complete form, meaning your mind, your heart, and your body. And things that we need to accept are things like reality as it is. So sometimes there's facts and there's things that we don't like, but that's the reality. So that's something that needs to be accepted. Other things are things like limitations of the future, right? So things that we don't have control over, things that because of the current state that we're in might limit our future possibilities. Those are things that we need to accept. We also need to accept that everything has a cause. Oftentimes when we are struggling with difficult experiences, we hone in on a specific event, right? If only I didn't do this one specific thing, then that would have changed everything. But meanwhile, we lose perspective that no, everything is a culmination of so many different instances that led up to this moment. So accepting the reality of that it's much bigger than what it seems. And the last thing we need to accept is that life is pain, and that there's pain in life, and it's not something that we can escape. It's not something that we can avoid. And the more that we try to do this, the more suffering we actually inflict upon ourselves. Now, at this point, you might be wondering, well, why exactly should I accept reality? Okay, yes, it's quote good to accept reality because I might make myself suffer, but it's hard and I don't want to. So I'm going to read now from my DBT workbook. So this is a book that I used while I was going through the DBT program, but this is also something that I use with my own clients. And Marsha Linehan, within her workbook, states many reasons why we should accept reality. The first one is that rejecting reality does not change reality, right? So when something happens, if we reject it, it doesn't change the fact that this is what has happened. The second thing is that changing reality requires first accepting reality. Carl Rogers talks about this, about the curious paradox that when we fully accept ourselves, it's then that we can change. When we don't accept our limitations, when we don't accept our nature, our shadow, all the things that we are, it's hard to progress. It's hard to change our realities, our relationships with ourselves and with others. The third reason why we should accept reality is that pain can't be avoided. And pain is actually a way to signal us that something is wrong, that maybe someone is stepping over our boundaries, over our personal limits, and that we need to take action. The fourth reason, which is relating to this, is that when we don't accept reality, we cause suffering. So by not accepting pain, by not accepting reality, we cause ourselves to suffer. The fifth reason why we should accept reality is that refusing to accept reality can keep you stuck in this loop of sadness, of anger, of bitterness, of resentment, of shame. And resentment and bitterness are really powerful emotions that will eat away at your core. And at your core only, and not at others. And so we need to recognize this, that remaining bitter and resentful by refusing to accept reality is doing more harm than good, especially to yourself. The sixth reason why we should accept reality is that acceptance, although it may lead to initial sadness, is often followed by a sense of calmness and peace and deep integration of the shadow parts of who we are. And it's really when we begin to integrate these parts of ourselves that we don't like, or the reality of life that we don't like, that we can start to change and start to see things from a new, fresh perspective that actually enables us to grow and to become resilient and to improve our lives in so many ways that we never thought possible. The last reason why we should accept reality, and I really, really like this point, so I'm just going to read it verbatim for what it is. The path out of hell is through misery. By refusing to accept the misery that is a part of climbing out of hell, you fall back into hell. And so this really states that radical acceptance of reality, allows you to climb out of hell. And you need to experience that misery. You need to experience the sadness. You need to experience the injustice of life to get yourself out of there. If not, you're just going to keep falling back into the depths of hell. And I know that that is not where you want to be. I really want to emphasize the fact that radical acceptance is not approval. It's not compassion. It's not being passive. It's not against change. The motto of radical acceptance is, it is what it is. When we radically accept something, the reality of our experiences, it is by no means saying that we approve of them, that we like them, that we're okay with them. For example, if someone is abusing you, by accepting the reality of the current state of the relationship that you're in, you're by no means approving of this person's behavior or liking it or being okay with being treated that way. But the fact is that that is something that happened to you. It is what it is. And when you can accept that, then you can propel yourself to change. So radical acceptance is not being passive. It's not being compliant to being taken advantage of. And acceptance is actually the first step that allows you to change. Things that often get in the way of radically accepting things is this belief, like I had just said, that if we accept things, then we're just approving of it and we're being passive. And so once we start to understand what the true nature of acceptance really is, we can start to put into practice more often. Something else also that sometimes get in the way is having really intense emotions. As we know, when we feel very intensely, it can be hard to see reality for what it is. It can be hard to see the facts of what is actually happening. And so if this is a barrier or a block that you're experiencing, I would encourage you to put into practice other DBT distress tolerance skills. So the accepts, distract skills or the tip skill to help calm your nervous system down, to engage your wise mind so that you can really face reality for what it objectively is, and then begin the process of acceptance. So now that we understand what it is, how do we practically practice radical acceptance? The first step is to observe and notice that you are fighting reality. So noticing statements like, this shouldn't be this way, this shouldn't have happened, this is unfair, I don't want this, I don't like this. So noticing the mind trying to fight against the reality of your current experience. And the second step is to recognize that the reality, as painful as it is just that. And that you can use coping statements in this moment to help you recognize that this is the reality. So saying things like, I can't change the past. I can't change that this has happened. This is out of my control. Or there's a million different collections of moments that led me to this point, that led me to take this action. So recognizing the reality of it, that you can't change what happened, and that focusing on wanting to change it doesn't do anything because the reality has already occurred. Once we fully integrate the reality of the unpleasantness of what we are experiencing at this moment, then we practice acceptance with our whole self, right? So with this mind, heart, and body connection. So by doing things like mindful breathing, allowing us to breathe into that space and where we feel this discomfort in our sensations. By doing things like the half smile and the willing hands. So opening up our posture so that we can invite the unpleasant sensations to pass through us. Doing things like prayer or meditation or spending time in nature. So really doing things that allows us to ground ourselves fully, into the experience of what we are living. So through this process of whole body acceptance, it's like I said, we allow ourselves to be washed over by sadness or grief or anger or whatever just uncomfortable emotion needs to pass at that moment. And we see it for what it is. It's a physical sensation, and we stop the struggle with it and we allow it the space that it needs to process and move through. It's like, imagine that there's a river flowing, and sitting by the stream, you just watch the river flow, and the river is wise and knows how to flow, and it's actually putting branches and creating a barrier that stops the river from doing what it's meant to do, which is to flow smoothly. And when we put those barriers in the river, water starts to pool and pile up, and it starts to leak in different spots that it's not supposed to. This is what we're doing when we're not accepting reality, when we're putting those barriers up for ourselves. We're not allowing emotions to flow through us. You may think that, well, if I let myself feel emotions that don't have their place there, and that we make ourselves suffer. And so when we can start to think of emotions as mere sensations that will come and go, and that's part of their nature, it gets easier to accept the reality of the discomfort of the now. As a whole, that's the gist of what radical acceptance is. I know that it seems very simplistic, and it's definitely easier said than done, because our urges and instincts as humans is to struggle against discomfort. It's to run away from things that cause us harm, whether that's perceived or real harm. We have this tendency to run away. And the more that you do it, the more that you practice, the easier it gets. On that note, let me know in the comments down below if you would be interested in me releasing a guided meditation on radical acceptance. If this would be helpful to you, you can just plop a comments down below. I always read and respond to all of them. On that note, I wish you all an amazing week, and I will see you back here next time for another episode of On the Line.